Hi, James Casey here. I wanted to say a word or two about Jeff Beck, who died very recently. For me, he was the absolute greatest of guitarists and was utterly fascinating to me. I'm very glad that I was told of his death by my Ether City colleague Chris Mays. I'd much rather have been that way than chancing across it on a news website. For me, Jeff Beck was always riding on the edge of disaster, always taking chances, always pushing what you could do with a fairly simple setup. And as a result, he ended up coming up with innovations that no one else had really even considered trying, let alone being able to understand when they saw him doing it. And at times his guitar sound really didn't sound like it was a guitar at all. There's a great video of him playing with ZZ Top where the sounds he's getting out of the guitar sound like someone's playing a harmonica. No idea what on earth he's doing to coax that sound out of the instrument. And with him, a lot of what he was doing was in his right hand. With guitarists, when you watch them, often you're looking at the hand that they're playing the notes with. So with a right-hand guitarist, it would be the left hand. But with Jeff, a lot of the stuff I was fascinated in was what he was doing with this hand. Now, with a lot of other guitarists, if you're looking at them, that's not perhaps so interesting. They may be picking with a plectrum, or they might be, if they're playing fingerstyle, it might be a little bit more interesting. But with Jeff, he was doing all kinds of stuff that wasn't even on the strings. At any given moment, while he was playing something very technical with his left hand, or even very simple, his right hand was up to all kinds of mischief. He might be changing the pickup that he was using. He might be striking the strings with his thumb or his fingers, because for the last sort of, I don't know, 30 or so years he hadn't been using a plectrum much at all. It was mostly his fingers, I guess because he could get more tonal variety out of it that way. He would be adjusting the volume, he might be adjusting the tone controls, he would be changing the pitch of the note with the whammy bar. He would even be using the heel of his palm to push the floating bridge here, which would again change the note that he's playing. So there are all kinds of things going on, and so many people comment on the fact that he played almost no two notes the same, because he was always doing something to colour or change the sound ever so slightly. If I can give a couple of illustrations, there are a couple of things that in particular. So if you listen to the song "Where Were You" from the Jeff Beck's Guitar Shop album, it's a song there's tons and tons of use of the whammy bar, as indeed so much of his playing was. But he's doing things. He's changing notes with the whammy bar and the precision with which he's doing it is technically, magical. So whereas I might play something simple like this, that's how I might do it, he would be doing like this, like that. So he's doing it, but he's doing it so precisely. It's just extraordinary. This is not an exact science, and moving this up and down the right amount to change it by exactly, one semitone or one tone, to move from one note really precisely to the other, is extraordinarily difficult. And he wasn't just doing it with normal notes, he was playing harmonics and changing those as well, all across the guitar neck. Technically extraordinarily complex. Another thing that he tended to do quite a lot was volume swells. So I might play something like this. I have to play it slowly because I can't do the thing that he does quickly enough. So I might play this. So there we are. Now when I'm doing that, the big part of the sound is that initial impact of my thumb on the string. And after that, the sound starts to tail off, it starts to die away. Well, Jeff was getting rid of that initial impact completely. He was doing something more like this. Where he's starting with no sound at all and then rolling up the volume after he's hit the note. So it sounds much smoother, it sounds extraordinarily alien. And of course he was playing that at speed, at high speed. And the real challenge with that possibly is not so much doing it, the sheer thing you're having to concentrate on playing the note as well as turning the volume up and down as well. But you're actually having to hit the note before you want it heard, which is really quite challenging to do. So there were these amazing things that he was doing at any given moment. And sometimes he was doing more than one of these things at the same time with his right hand. So just technical wizardry. And there are so many people out there who tell stories of him doing mad things, like Alice Cooper telling a story of seeing him live once where he was basically holding a guitar and then would slowly drop it while still playing it. He wasn't touching it with this hand anymore. He was just letting the guitar drop while still playing it. And it was perfect. So absolutely crazy, crazy stuff that he could do. He wasn't someone that I grew up with. So there were various people that I might have heard on the radio or my parents might have been playing records of when I was a kid. People like George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Brian May, Mark Knopfler, David Gilmour, Pete Townsend, Keith Richards, people like that. And then when I was a teen, Slash. Those were the big people who shaped my subconscious idea of what a guitar should sound like. So that whenever I'm playing guitar, I'm tweaking what I'm doing due to some sort of, childhood memory of what I ought to sound like based on them. But Jeff Beck wasn't really one of those people. I encountered him a lot later on. I think the first time I really remember doing that was George Martin's In My Life album. And Jeff Beck played on A Day in the Life on that album. And it's an album of Beatles covers, and there are all kinds of people on it. So Sean Connery is reading the lyrics to In My Life while there's music behind that, and there's Billy Connolly doing For the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and there's Jim Carrey doing I'm the Walrus, and all sorts of other people. It's a star-studded album. And with A Day in the Life, they have an arrangement that's very similar to the actual Beatles version from Sgt. Pepper. But they don't have a vocalist on it. They have Jeff Beck playing guitar because, as George Martin put it, and I weirdly was able to bump into him at a party 2 days before the album came out. But George Martin said of Jeff that he's the only person who can make a guitar sound like the human voice. Then I think that kind of almost opened up an avenue for Jeff Beck that he pursued for quite some time afterwards, but for the rest of his career, where he would do instrumental versions of songs. So he did Nessun Dorma, he did Somewhere Over the Rainbow, an amazing version of that, which again, he's just doing extraordinary changes of notes. Because the thing about using the whammy to change the note is it's such a smooth transition, but it's so difficult to get right. So yeah, that was a kind of an avenue for him, and that was the first time I encountered him. And then the second time was probably, again, it was a George Martin connection, because I knew that George Martin had produced a couple of Jeff Beck's albums, Blow by Blow and Wired, in the 70s, which were big hits. And again, that had kind of sent Jeff Beck off a particular direction that had really had a great impact on his career. And I bought Blow by Blow, and from that point onwards, it's been one of my favourite albums. And bizarrely, I was playing it to my kids the evening of the day he died, although I only learned about it the day later. But it's something I've played a lot down the years. It's just extraordinary music. And I've got several other of his albums. I can't remember if I've got Loudhailer. I've got Emotion and Commotion, the Great Truth album. I've got The Guitar Shop. What else have I got? Anyway, quite a few others. But I think the big thing that really started the kind of obsession with him was seeing a video on YouTube of him at, I guess it must have been Jools Holland's Hootenanny, doing a song, Drown in My Own Tears, and he's backed by Jools and the big band. And it's basically a 3 or 4 minute guitar masterclass, because there almost isn't a thing you can do on guitar that he doesn't do a 2 or 3 second burst of in that session on that song. He's doing tapping, and by the way, it's hard for me to even think of any of Jeff's contemporaries from the 60s who got so heavily into new techniques. I mean, tapping wasn't new, but to the extent to which people like Eddie Van Halen popularised it, he was doing that kind of thing, Jeff was, and he could do it. All of the new stuff he could keep up with, he could do it if he wanted to do it. So he's doing tapping, he's using his palm to change the notes, he's doing harmonics, he's doing whammy bar stuff, volume swells, all of that kind of stuff, as well as playing amazing stuff, slowly, beautifully, or at high speed. But one of the things I love the most is the feedback, and then this punch of the guitar neck. And let me try and see if I can get it going here. I have to turn it up a bit here to get it going. If we can get some feedback going, we can probably emulate what he's doing. Yeah, here we go. And then he goes like that. He just whacks it. He lets it ring out, and then it gives the guitar a whack, which is just absolutely fantastic. So after that, I just devoured YouTube for all kinds of things. And again, I can't think of a single other guitarist who I want to watch so much. I might listen to their stuff and think that's absolutely fantastic, but with Jeff Beck, I'm watching him. So what is he doing? How is he doing that? And I would watch so many things. I'd watch Further On Up the Road with Eric Clapton from, I think, the early 80s, where they're playing at a benefit concert, and Jeff Beck's just, incendiary guitar playing on a Telecaster that's got a Gibson humbucker in the neck. It's just really brutal playing. And then there's more recently there's a gig he did with B.B. King, and I think at B.B. King's club, where he's playing a few songs, and there's just stuff in Rock Me Baby where you're watching it because you're trying to find Jeff video after Jeff video, and you say, oh yeah, he's doing that thing, yeah, I've seen him do that thing before, yeah, I've seen him do that thing, and then he comes up with something, you think, where is he getting those notes from? So it's just absolutely mad stuff. And then there's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I can't remember if this is where Metallica got inducted, but anyway, he's playing with, I think, Kirk Hammett, and there are all sorts of lead guitarists on stage, all of whom are watching Jeff, and he takes the first solo. I think they're playing Train Kept A-Rollin', and Jeff takes the first solo, and he's in it at 100 miles an hour, playing a kind of a metal style riff, and it's totally unorthodox, not something you would sort of dream up, but it's just tremendous, and everyone just loving it. The people on stage more probably even than the audience. And similarly, at his own induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's another great video to check out. And I'll put links to all of these in the description, though goodness knows how long they'll be up for. But he played at least 2 songs at that induction. He played, and he got Jimmy Page, his old friend from school days, on to play as well. And they played Beck's Bolero from the Truth album, and Jimmy Page is playing a 12-string, just as he did on that actual song. And then they go into Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. But instead of, and again they have Jimmy Page playing, but Jeff Beck is playing the lead vocalist line on the guitar. So all these, that's all on the guitar. So it's just absolutely fantastic stuff. And the Ronnie Scott gig as well is just a glorious thing to watch. And they have a great version there of Where Were You? But one of the ones I was looking for most recently, though, was I can't remember which album it's from, but it's the second version of the Jeff Beck group in the early 70s. They had where Max Middleton was in them. They had a song they did, Going Down. Now that was it Don Nix who wrote the song, and it was a big hit for Freddie King. And it's, how does it go? It's the one that, yeah. So I'm going down, 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 down. It's that one, and loads of people did it, and the Jeff Beck group did a version that's quite similar to Freddie King's, but it looks like the way they like to do it was with Max Middleton playing a sort of a jazz piano intro before they kind of went into the song proper. And it looks like they did, because I've heard a few versions they did of it, live versions, and it seems like they always did this, but there's one particular gig, and it's at the Beat Club, which was a show they had based in Bremen in Germany. They did this in 1972, where Max Middleton goes on and on and on. And they just, he just plays this, he plays for about 2 minutes or so, and Jeff only comes in about 2 minutes and 16 seconds into the song, if you find it. It's on an album, and it's almost, if you watch the footage, which unfortunately I was looking for it about a couple of weeks ago, and I can't find the footage anymore on YouTube. You can still hear it, but you can't see it, and it looks as though Jeff's getting increasingly frustrated because Max Middleton's taking so long over the intro. And every time it sounds like Max Middleton's about to end, he just goes into another ending. It's like Dudley Moore playing, all those Beethoven endings that just never end. He just keeps going down another avenue when you think he's come to a halt. And in the footage, Jeff's sort of stepping forward, ready to play, and then he realises Max hasn't stopped, and so he steps back. And so by the time that he actually does realise that Max is coming to a close and the song's about to start, it's like he's got so much pent-up frustration that he just goes this whole wow thing on his guitar before he even starts playing anything in particular. And it's like a laser gun's gone off. It's just extraordinary. And I realised when I was sort of thinking about all this, just how much his playing and the things that he put into things, not just the notes, but the theatrics as much as anything, have had a very subtle influence on what I do. Now, taking the video that I recorded most recently, Lady on a Green Train, when I was doing the lead guitar part for it, there are at least 2 points in there where I'm doing things that I would only do because of Jeff Beck. I do a thing where I just at the end of the sort of intro, I just go down the guitar with the plectrum, and that's, I mean, Jeff Beck's not the only person who did that, but that's why I'm doing it. And similarly, there's a bit in it where I'm playing something while holding the guitar up. And again, Jeff Beck's not the only person to play a guitar while holding it straight upwards, but that's why I'm doing it. So really, that's why I needed to do this video, because so much of him has seeped into the way I want to play guitar. And over a relatively short period of my life, he wasn't someone I grew up with. But having seen what he could do and loving it and failing to understand it has really just made me want to take chances. And I'm not someone who, by and large, is a master of improvisation. I mentioned Chris Mays at the start of this video, and I know he's into his improvisation every time he's doing something like that. A lot of the time I'm planning stuff. So a lot of the time when I'm playing a solo, I would say half of it is planned already, and I might improvise around certain predetermined bits of music, stuff that I've worked out in advance. I would love to get to the point where I'm improvising all the time. But it's people like Jeff and it's that kind of thing that are the real impetus to really push myself, because the stuff you can do is just amazing if you will only take a chance, and that applies to anything in life. So the big lesson I've taken from thinking about Jeff in the last day or so, turn up your amplifier, because the louder you play, the more you can do. Probably is a general lesson for life, who knows. Cheers.